Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to be reading and analyzing T.S. Eliot's poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. A quick word of warning. This is the most difficult of all of the readings that I'm going to be going through in modernism. So if we get to the end of this and it just seems really difficult and obtuse and incomprehensible to you, just know that it only gets easier from here on out. T.S. Eliot as a poet is known for writing poems that are full of complex symbols and allusions, references to ancient literature and biblical passages, and he weaves them all together to create, I think, what most people consider to be pretty difficult poems. Now, I came across a quote from T.S. Eliot a few years ago that I love. He said, "Genuine poetry can communicate before it is understood." And I love that because that, first of all, has been my experience with T.S. Eliot's poems. I remember when I was in high school, I would read some of them and I thought that I wasn't getting it at all. I came back to his poetry years later and found that with a little bit of maturity that I understood them better, but also that I understood them a lot more when I was a teenager than I gave myself credit for. And I think it's that this is actually my experience with poetry in general at that time, not just T.S. Eliot, that I would get caught up with things that I didn't understand, and I would fixate on the parts of it that I didn't understand rather than just focus on the things that I did. And I think this is very important to understand about poetry. You don't have to understand every reference, you don't have to understand every single thing that it's saying to get something from the poem. And I think that's what T.S. Eliot is saying here. That and if we were reading this together in class, face to face, what I would do is I would, in the first, I would read the first couple of stanzas of this poem to you, and I ask you to write down images that speak to you, and what emotions they suggest. When I've done that in the past, students always pick up on the emotions that he's expressing in the poems. And so I just want to encourage you. I think that if you were reading this on your own, you really would pick up a lot more about it than you might realize at first. But anyway, let's dive into it. The poem begins with a quote from Dante's Inferno. You see it's in Italian. If you care to, you can look up the translation of it. I have before, I can't really remember what it is, and honestly, I'm not really going to worry about that right now. After this little quote from Dante's Inferno, we begin T.S. Eliot's poem itself. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. All right, so Eliot starts off the poem by creating kind of a mood, and he does that by describing this night. When I ask students to pick out what images stand out to them, one line that students always pick every time is this one: that the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. Etherized is like sedated. The patient is unconscious on the table, and all of these images that he's using at the beginning of the poem are speaking to kind of this deadness, this stillness in the night, and there's just kind of a, I don't know, a sad, or I don't know, I guess you might even say a depressing mood to this. All right, let's go on. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. This line is repeated in the poem. I'll come back to this later. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. Now, you might notice that he's describing this yellow fog with terms that refer to a cat. He refers to, he is talking about this yellow fog or the yellow smoke, talks about rubbing its muzzle, licking its tongue, curling up, going to sleep. It's very cat-like. And indeed, there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you, and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. All right. So what's happening in the poem, and this is something I probably would not have picked up on my own if I didn't have other people who've explained it for me. But what's happening here is that the speaker in the poem, this J. Alfred Prufrock, is visiting a house for some kind of a party, and there are women inside. That's what this line is referenced to. So inside of this house, there are these women socializing, talking of Michelangelo, talking about art. There's kind of a popular subject for the time. And meanwhile, here's the speaker outside of the party, and he's hesitating. And I've seen, in some visual representation of this poem, I've seen people actually show this man standing outside of the door, like his hand on the doorknob, hesitating to go inside. We'll find out why that is. And indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare, and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. This line in particular speaks to me for obvious reasons. As I get older, I have to say, I relate to this J. Alfred Prufrock more and more. If you haven't picked up on it yet, this guy, he's self-conscious. He worries about his appearance. He's a middle-aged man. He's aware of himself aging. This is why he is so insecure and why he's so hesitant to go in and join the party and socialize with these attractive women. They will say how his hair is growing thin, my morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I like that line in particular. To me, that speaks to kind of just the mundaneness of his life. He's looking at his life, and every day is the same. Every morning he takes his breakfast, stirs his coffee with a spoon, and his days are just a never-ending line of coffee spoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a further room. So how should I presume? And I have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated, sprawling on a pin, he's using the image of an insect that's been stuck with a pin. That's how he sees himself. When I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways, and how should I presume? And I have known the arms already, known them all, arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight downed with light brown hair. Now he's describing the appearance of these women inside at the party. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table or wrap about a shawl? And should I then presume? And how should I begin? Shall I say I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. All right, so this guy, he's so insecure, so miserable, so unhappy with his life. He is literally wishing that he had been born as some kind of a lobster or a crab, just living at the bottom of the ocean. And the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me, should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis. But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. All right, the head on a platter is a reference to John the Baptist, who, according to the Bible, was beheaded and his head was brought in on a platter. So he's comparing himself to John the Baptist, a very noble comparison, but he qualifies it. He says, I am no prophet. He is not worthy of that comparison. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker. And in short, I was afraid. Here, the eternal footman, I believe, is a reference to death. So, this guy, middle aged, having a midlife crisis, sees the end of his days, sees death waiting for him, and he is afraid. And would it have been worth it after all? After the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worth while to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all. If one, settling a pillow by her head, should say, that is not what I meant at all, that is not it at all. And would it have been worth it, after all? Would it have been worthwhile? After the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this, and so much more, it is impossible to say just what I mean. But as if a magic lantern threw the nerves and patterns on a screen, would it have been worthwhile if one, settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window, should say, that is not it at all, that is not what I meant at all? No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Am an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two. So the reference here to Prince Hamlet is clearly from William Shakespeare's play Hamlet. So another literary reference, another case of him comparing himself to some famous literary figure. But here again, he says he is not Prince Hamlet. He is not the star of the play of his life. If anything, he's a minor character in the story of his own life. That's how insignificant he feels. So he says, I am an attendant lord, one that will do to slow progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt, an easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious, and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse, at times, indeed, almost ridiculous, almost at times the fool. I grow old. I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. So again, clearly he's thinking about himself, growing older, and just kind of giving in to him becoming an old man and moving ever closer to his own death. I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea-girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us, and we drown. All right, so that's the end of the poem. I tried to explain just a few of the more obvious references there. There's a whole lot in here I am not even going to try to explain because, again, like I said at the beginning, I really do not think that you have to understand everything about a poem to get something from it. And when I've read this with students in the past, even students that struggle with poetry, I think what they get from this is that this is a very sad poem. This is written from the point of view of somebody who is clearly in the middle of a midlife crisis, who is feeling insecure. And and I guess just one final note before I end this. What makes this a work of modernism is that T.S. Eliot is using all of these complex literary and biblical metaphors to tell a story about just a regular guy. I think that that was a very popular idea at the time of modernism. And there is a connection to realism of writing about regular ordinary people, but I think what the difference with modernism is it's using the tools of what we consider to be more like classical literature, really like difficult literature, to describe these lives of ordinary people. All right, I'm just going to leave it at that. One final word, though. There are a lot of different like visual interpretations I've come across of this. If you're interested, there is somebody who has a website where they made a comic book adaptation of this poem, which I think is fantastic. I think they do a really good job of creating visuals all throughout that really help to enhance the meaning of the poem and help to make it clear what some of these references are. So I'm going to put a link to that in the description. But thank you all for listening.